This was not only a trial of men. It was a trial of a system that turned law into a weapon. What happened in that courtroom would send shockwaves through every future war. The stakes were whether aggressive war and mass murder could be punished by law. The world was watching to see if justice could survive victory. Welcome to Gavel Files, where justice tells its story. Today we examine the International Military Tribunal at Nuremberg, Germany. It was the first time global powers tried leaders for international crimes. It was also a warning, written into the record. According to court documents, the Allied powers formed the prosecution as a united front. The United States, the United Kingdom, the Soviet Union, and France joined together. They faced 24 major Nazi leaders in the dock. Names included Hermann Göring, Rudolf Hess, and Joachim von Ribbentrop. The tribunal was led by President Judge Jeffrey Lawrence. The bench also included Francis Biddle, Henri Donadieu de Vabre, and Iona Nikitchenko. Court documents reveal why Nuremberg was chosen for this reckoning. The city had hosted Nazi rallies that celebrated power and racial destiny. Now it offered an intact courtroom and a prison nearby. The symbolism was deliberate, and the logistics were practical. The trial began in November 1945. Germany had surrendered months earlier, in May 1945. Prosecutors argued that the crimes were not random battlefield horrors. They said the crimes were planned, ordered, and administered. The case rested on the idea of individual responsibility. The defendants were not on trial as a nation. They were on trial as decision-makers with names and signatures. The tribunal charter came from the London Agreement in August 1945. It created a new court for a new kind of case. The incident that triggered the tribunal was the collapse of the Nazi state. Allied forces entered camps, ministries, and command posts. They found documents, orders, and ledgers that told a story. According to testimony, survivors described deportations, forced labor, and mass shootings. Allied troops filmed what they saw in liberated camps. Those images would later become evidence with a terrible clarity. The world had heard rumors, but now there were records. The legal action began with a question. Would the victors simply punish, or would they prosecute? Court documents reveal the answer was prosecution, with rules and procedures. The prosecution prepared an indictment that aimed at leadership. It targeted those who planned war, waged it, and exploited it. It also targeted those who built the machinery of extermination. The tribunal would test whether law could speak after catastrophe. But what happened next would change everything. Investigation teams gathered evidence across a shattered continent. The evidence showed a bureaucracy of violence, written in memos and stamped directives. Prosecutors argued that the Nazi leadership pursued wars of aggression. They said it was a crime against peace to plan and launch such wars. They also alleged war crimes including murder and ill treatment of civilians. They alleged crimes against humanity, including extermination and deportation. They also alleged conspiracy to commit these acts. Court documents reveal the indictment was built around 4 central counts. Crimes against peace came first, because it framed the war itself. War crimes followed, grounded in the laws and customs of war. Crimes against humanity addressed the mass violence against civilians. Conspiracy tied the defendants together in a common criminal plan. The prosecution did not rely on a single witness. It relied on a mountain of paper and on human voices. The trial opened with a formal gravity, not a lynch mob mood. The defendants sat behind glass, listening through translation. The courtroom carried 4 languages and one purpose. According to testimony, the atmosphere was tense but controlled. Robert H. Jackson led the United States prosecution. Hartley Shawcross spoke for the United Kingdom. Their task was to show intent, knowledge, and participation. Pre-trial disputes shaped the boundaries of the case. The defense challenged the tribunal's legitimacy. They argued it was victor's justice dressed as law. The judge ruled that the charter governed the proceedings. The tribunal would hear the evidence and apply the charter. There would be no ordinary appeals process afterward. Finality was part of the design. Opening statements laid down the moral and legal map. Prosecutors argued that aggression was the root crime. From it flowed occupation, plunder, and slaughter. They said the defendants used state power to commit private evil at public scale. The defense maintained that the tribunal applied laws created after the acts. They warned of retroactive punishment. They also claimed that war is governed by power, not courts. The prosecution answered with documents and dates. Drop a comment. Do you think the verdict was fair? And then the prosecution revealed their key evidence. The prosecution's case unfolded like an archive coming to life. Court documents reveal that captured Nazi records were central. Orders, meeting minutes, and communications traced decisions to individuals. The evidence showed how ministries coordinated with military and police organs. It showed deportation schedules and forced labor allocations. It showed that extermination was not a rumor, but a policy. The tribunal heard that paper can be as deadly as bullets. Then came testimony that stripped away abstraction. According to testimony, witnesses described selections, starvation, and mass graves. Survivors spoke of families separated and never returned. Eyewitnesses described shootings at pits and bodies falling in layers. The courtroom did not need exaggeration. The facts were heavy enough. Prosecutors argued that these were not excesses by rogue actors. They said it was organized and encouraged from above. The film evidence struck with a different force. The evidence showed Allied footage from liberated camps. It showed emaciated prisoners, piles of corpses, and crematoria. According to testimony, the courtroom fell quiet as the reels played. Some defendants looked away, others stared ahead. The images had a power beyond words. They also undercut claims that the world could not know. Knowledge was now projected on a screen. If this case is gripping you, hit that like button. The defense strategy tried to break the chain of responsibility. The defense maintained that the defendants acted under state authority. They argued that leaders cannot be judged like ordinary criminals. They also argued that many acts were wartime measures, not crimes. Some claimed ignorance of extermination policies. Others claimed they opposed certain actions, quietly and unsuccessfully. The tribunal demanded more than posture. It demanded proof. Cross-examination produced some of the trial's most dramatic clashes. Hermann Goering presented himself as a statesman, not a gangster. He sparred with prosecutors and tried to seize the narrative. According to testimony, he was defiant and calculating. He admitted building institutions, but denied criminal intent. Prosecutors argued that his denials collapsed under documents bearing his authority. The evidence showed coordination, not coincidence. Another major defense theme was superior orders. The defense maintained that obedience is compulsory in a dictatorship. They argued that refusal would mean death or imprisonment. The judge ruled that orders could be considered in mitigation, but orders would not erase criminal responsibility. That ruling would echo across future tribunals. It declared that humanity is not optional, even under command. The jury had heard enough, but they were not ready for this. As the case moved toward closing arguments, the prosecution returned to first principles. Prosecutors argued that law must reach leaders or it reaches nobody. They said the defendants used war to unleash crimes beyond war. They asked the tribunal to declare that aggressive war is punishable. They also asked it to declare that mass murder of civilians is punishable. They framed the trial as a line drawn for the future. The defense closed with warnings about precedent. The defense maintained that the tribunal was political, not legal. They argued that similar acts had been committed by other nations. They urged acquittal or leniency, citing chaos and collapse. Some asked the tribunal to separate ideology from criminality. Others asked it to separate war from atrocity. The tribunal listened, then withdrew to deliberate. Deliberation took place over several days in September 1946. Judges weighed counts, defendants, and evidence. The tribunal had to write a judgment that would endure scrutiny. Court documents reveal careful findings on each charge. The judges parsed membership in organizations and personal acts. They assessed planning meetings and execution orders. They also assessed what each defendant knew and when. The weight of proof mattered, even here. After deliberation, the foreman stood up. The verdict reading was long, methodical, and historic. The jury found 19 defendants guilty across the major counts. 3 defendants were acquitted, a signal of restraint. The tribunal distinguished between guilt by position and guilt by proof. According to testimony, the courtroom reacted with controlled shock. Some defendants appeared stunned, others composed. The judgment spoke in the language of law, not vengeance. The tribunal's words became part of international legal memory. It declared that initiating a war of aggression is the supreme international crime. It also declared that crimes are committed by men, not abstract entities. Those statements aimed at future tyrants. They also aimed at future prosecutors and judges. The ruling insisted that state power does not immunize criminal acts. It insisted that victims are not invisible to law. Sentencing followed with grim precision. 12 death sentences were imposed to be carried out by hanging. 3 defendants were sentenced to life imprisonment. 4 received prison terms ranging from 10 to 20 years. There were no fines and no negotiated exits. Executions were carried out in October 1946. Hermann Göring avoided the gallows through suicide before execution. There was no formal appeals process under the tribunal charter. The judgment was final, by design and by necessity. The aftermath spread through prisons and politics for decades. Some surviving prisoners were later released by 1966. The world moved into a new era of conflict and accountability. Yet Nuremberg remained a reference point, cited in later prosecutions. Court documents reveal its influence on the Nuremberg principles. The legal impact reached beyond Germany and beyond that decade. Prosecutors argued, and the tribunal affirmed, that individuals can be punished under international law. The judge ruled that superior orders do not erase guilt. The evidence showed how documentary proof can defeat denial. The case helped shape the United Nations Genocide Convention. It also influenced modern war crimes courts and the International Criminal Court. It taught that legality can follow atrocity and still matter. Where are they now is a question answered by history's finality. Robert H. Jackson died in 1954, but his arguments endure. All the defendants are dead, by execution, imprisonment, or time. The tribunal itself ended, but its model survived. Its records remain studied by lawyers and citizens. According to testimony and archives, Nuremberg still divides opinion. Yet it remains a cornerstone of accountability. The International Military Tribunal Nuremberg trials reminds us that justice is never simple. Share this video with someone who cares about justice. Drop a comment with your verdict. Guilty or not guilty? Hit like and subscribe to Gavel Files for more cases where justice tells its story. Next week, we examine another case that shook the nation.